Welcome to Photoactive, a podcast about photography and technology. I'm Kirk McElhearn.
And I'm Jeff Carlson.
You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. We couldn't afford the M. Hello, Jeff. It's been a while.
It's been a while. It's always been a while, but it's always good to be back.
This week we have a guest. We've been very interested in covering the many photo editing apps available for Mac and for iOS. And was it just our last episode we talked about Luminar?
Yes, it was.
So this week we have Andrius Gailiunas, and I'm trying very hard to pronounce his name correctly because I'm a language guy. Andrius, hi. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, it's very, very great to be here. I'm glad that you've invited me on.
Andrius works for the Pixelmator team. Pixelmator, Pixelmator Pro, Pixelmator Photo. There's a whole bunch of Pixelmator apps. Pixelmator is an interesting alternative to other photo editing apps. And we're going to talk about the apps for Mac and for iOS, but I think on the Mac space, it's more interesting to look at its abilities. How long has Pixelmator been around? Is it 3, 4, 5 years?
Oh, much longer than that. Pixelmator's been around since, I believe, 2007, if I'm not mistaken. So 13 years. The original Pixelmator, yes.
So quickly, can you go through the 4 Pixelmator apps that exist now?
Right, so exactly. So we started off with just the regular old Pixelmator, which was a layer-based editor on the Mac. And then we released Pixelmator for iOS, which is when the iPad came out. And that was demoed on stage with one of the iPad releases. And that was a companion app, a layer-based editor on the iPad. So again, with most of the kind of, Photoshop style editing tools. And then we decided to work on this, Pixelmator version 2 that we call Pixelmator Pro. And then we released the Pixelmator Photo on the iPad, so the 4th app. And that is just that app for photographers, right? It's just the photo development tools, the repair tool, and this is just available on the iPad, and it's very tightly integrated with the Photos app. So you use that for management, and you edit your images with the Pixelmator Photo, and then you save your edits back to your library. And so we've kind of, without building our own digital asset manager, we've, used the native tools as we love to do whenever we can, to create this photo editing app.
So part of what I find interesting about Pixelmator, and specifically Pixelmator Pro, being saddled with an old code base, something, that's 10 years old, and wanting to start fresh. It was my impression that Pixelmator Pro was largely a ground-up rewrite. It wasn't just, we're going to add some more features to what we had before. The regular Pixelmator is still there, but Pixelmator Pro is going to be taking advantage of new technologies and new APIs and new capabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
One of them being the thing that we're going to get into here, which is a lot of the machine learning stuff, which I assume really sort of needed a brand new app to move forward on rather than trying to shoehorn it into old code.
I would say that's right. I mean, it's not just the machine learning stuff. It's a lot of I think if you do ask, almost every developer, after developing an app for 5-10 years, if you ask them what would they like to rewrite the whole thing with all the things they've learned and all the new technologies available, most would say yes. I mean, even web devs would be like, oh man, I wish I could, because I know someone say, I wish I could redo this right now because it's all just held together in these various places. But even so, that's not always a great idea. And I mean, in general, rewriting an app is a very risky thing to do. So, and we decided at some point that it was worth it, that we could do something. But even then, I mean, after we released Pixelmator Pro, there's been 2 years of just patching things up that we maybe didn't think about for 1.0, which we never considered that. We need to get this working just this very specific way.
But also, you have to catch up with macOS updates. New versions of macOS definitely throw spanners into the works.
Almost every year. Actually, I think this year was one of the easiest. So Catalina.
Really?
Was it Catalina? Yeah, I think Catalina was one of the, in terms of developer, how much work we had to do just to fix, all the new things. It was one of the easier updates. But every year, it's always something. And I mean, I don't know if anyone's interested, but there's things like moving to Metal, right? So Mac was based on a lot of the graphic stuff was based on OpenGL, and then now that's getting phased out, and all our code, and in Pixelmator, the original was based on OpenGL, but now I think as of the next version of macOS, OpenGL is completely deprecated, so no code can be. So you have to rewrite all the graphic stuff. So I mean, and that happens. That's normal. That's fine.
But there's an advantage that you're now able to take advantage of the GPU for better performance, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Which you couldn't do before. And with the power of GPUs in modern Macs, that really makes a difference.
Makes a huge difference, and you can create lots of things that simply were not possible before. And that, again, now coming back to the machine learning stuff, definitely, without modern advances in GPUs and Core ML and the multi-GPU support on Core ML and stuff like that, the things that we've been able to add recently, like ML super resolution, just would not have been viable. Maybe possible, but like 5 minutes waiting for a single image, and that's not viable. Yeah.
Okay, before we get into more of the details, I do want to address the question of there not being a digital asset manager. And, you hear some of your competitors, Affinity Photo, I believe it was in the 20th century that they announced that they were working on a digital asset manager, and they still haven't got one. Luminar finally did, but I think Jeff doesn't really like it a lot.
It's very basic.
Yeah. Are you planning on one, and do you need to?
We aren't. It's not. It wouldn't be a top priority, and I think the reason why you haven't seen anything from a lot of companies that would like to is just it's actually a very, very difficult undertaking, much more so than, for example, a layer-based image editor, because you've got quite a few of those.
Layer-based image editors are easy. Any developer worth his salt can roll one out in a weekend.
Yeah, just
again, we are not programmers.
No, we're just being
but
sarcastic.
yeah, the reason why, of course, but the reason why we haven't and we don't really plan to is because our philosophy has always been when there's a native technology that we can take advantage of and integrate with, developed by Apple, we always want to do that. And I think photos, there are things that we'd like to see, but for now, for example, with Pixelmator Photo on the iPad, the experience is pretty seamless, right? So you open up the app and you see your photos library, you see your albums, you tap a photo to open it, you make your edits, tap done, and the changes along with all the non-destructive edits are automatically linked to that photo, saved, and you'll also see the edited version in your photos library. And yes, I think so. In that sense, we feel the experience is definitely good enough for us not to even need to think about creating a digital asset manager. On the Mac, we'd love to see that same thing on the Mac, right? Like if you could open up, your photos library in Pixelmator Photo, maybe even, I don't know, this is like a more of a utopian idea, but rate your photos, sort them in the ways people like to do so, and then also save your edits non-destructively. Again, on the Mac, we have a different approach. We have the Pixelmator Pro editing extension, so you can open up an image in your photos library, edit it with all the tools in Pixelmator Pro using the extension, and again, save your changes non-destructively back to the library. So, I mean, we cover a lot of it, yes.
Yeah, that's brilliant on the Mac, and there aren't a lot of apps that can do that. We're actually going to have Nick Bott on in the future. He's the developer of Raw Power to talk about how that works. There are a few apps that do it, but most of them don't. Most of them hand off they just hand off a JPEG to the photo editing app. So if you're working on a raw photo in Photos and you open an app as an editing extension, most times you just get a JPEG that you edit and then bring back, and you can't. And these are destructive changes. Right. So the only way you can get back to your original is by exporting the original, and it's really messy.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think what you get is probably the TIFF, not if it's a RAW, which is kind of like which is a losslessly compressed, maybe not even compressed. But, so JPEG would usually have some compression, but with the TIFF, the quality is higher and stuff. But I think with other photos, you open up the sort of the processed version of the image, and your changes are merged, so you lose them, you can't go back to fine-tune them, and yeah, we love our approach, and we think it's really great. So that's what I can say.
Okay, let's take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk about machine learning, because that sounds so cool. Okay, we've taken our break, we've drunk our tea and coffee. Machine learning. So one thing that you've been doing with Pixelmator Pro is in your minor updates, you've been adding some really powerful features. The one that blew me away is this ML super resolution, ML standing presumably for machine learning.
Bingo.
We'll put a link in the show notes to an article on my blog where I took a picture of one of my cats and I reduced the picture and then I put it into Pixelmator and I blew it back up and the results were really stunning. Obviously, if you put the two side by side and zoom in, you can see the original and the upscaled one in Pixelmator, but it's very, very subtle. Two questions. How do you do it? I want to take notes here. And what's the whole machine learning thing? I mean, you've got little logos and buttons, ML, and we're hearing about machine learning everywhere. Do you tap into some archive of photos that Facebook has collected in order to see all the pictures of cats and know how they should scale? What goes on behind the scenes here? Okay,
so I'm not a developer, but I've spent enough time talking to our crazy scientists about this.
Crazy scientists.
Yeah, I mean they are crazy scientists, and I love them for it. So I think I should be able to explain this hopefully quite well. So first of all, I think when people hear the term machine learning, they imagine machines autonomously kind of gaining knowledge without human input, which is kind of what goes on. And I'm gonna kind of make this seem maybe a little bit less amazing than it is, but it's basically really, really vast statistical analysis that's made possible by the sort of improvements to processing speed on the latest, computers and GPUs and CPUs. And so basically the way it works is we get a bunch of photos. It doesn't even have to be all that many for certain things. And we take those, we reduce their size to a certain small size that we want to upscale to. And then the crazy maths and science happens where we create this thing called a loss function, which measures the quality of the upscaled result that we automatically upscale each image. And then using that, we can sort of fine-tune the parameters in the algorithm that we create. And with just enough training and the right loss function, which is where the magic happens and where the crazy scientists earn their money, we get this algorithm which can make predictions on a pixel level about what each color of pixels should be. So with the basic algorithms, we've kind of explained this on our blog post, which you can maybe link to as well. On a basic level, the algorithms like nearest neighbor will just copy one pixel. With any newly created pixel, it will take the nearest value. Say it's like a red pixel, so the closest pixel that it has to add will just also be red. And that's why you get the classic blocks. And you get the classic pixelated blocky appearance. Now, with bilinear, which is like a slightly more fancy algorithm, it will try and guess what the intermediate values between, like, say, a dark red and a light red pixel should be. So a medium red. But once you upscale an image enough, you'll start to see those sort of transitions, and you get that kind of classic blurry appearance that everyone kind of is familiar with, I would guess. And then there are some slightly more advanced versions, like Lansosh, which is based on this like mathematical formula where it tries to preserve edges, so it tries to kind of keep edges sharper, which does a better job in certain cases, but there's some trade-offs. And now with machine learning, what we do is we try to recognize in the image certain patterns, edges, textures, colors, gradients, and with each, this kind of intelligent algorithm does a pass over the image and tries to identify layers and layers of various features in the image. They're called features like gradients, edges, and so on. And it builds up into this like 100 channel deep representation. I'm getting quite taking a while to get to the point here, but it builds up a 100 channel deep representation of that image with all these individual features, and then upscales that. So once you put all that together, the edges and all the kind of details remain sharp. Obviously, it requires pretty crazy amounts of processing power, like 60,000 times more than the usual algorithms. But that's kind of machine learning. So as long as we have a data set that we can, and then we train the data set and train all the parameters by just seeing how close each sort of type of parameter gets to the target image.
And when you're doing that training, is that training happening on each person's Mac? Is it specific to each person, or is this a massive database that you collect?
We actually have our own sort of servers that we use for training. So once you and this is actually
so you just run a bunch of bots on your servers to train them for photos.
Yes. And the interesting thing is, once you decide to make a change, it can take you a couple of days, 2 or 3 days to actually get the results from you. Like, okay, so I think if we make a change to these sort of parameters, to this formula here and here, it might be better. Okay, let's do that, and now let's wait 3 days to see what happens.
Because you have so many photos.
Because we have so many photos, and because it has to, do all the passes of each thing, and then and test and slightly adjust the parameters each time and see, okay, is it getting closer? Is it not getting closer? Okay, we'll leave that parameter as it is, and then using all that, it makes these neural connections in the network that don't really make sense to people if you look at it, but it works.
It sounds all Blade Runner.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I love it.
So there's a lot of machine learning out there that relies on a lot of processing in the cloud. But as I understand it, when you're using ML super resolution, all of that processing is just happening locally on your computer. It's not uploading your image. It's not sharing that out. It's just crunching all the numbers locally.
Right. So yeah, and once you train that algorithm, you can turn that into a machine learning model, which is completely isolated, I guess. It's a thing. It's a piece of code, essentially, a block of code, a big one. Well, actually, relatively speaking, I think ML super resolution right now is about 5 megabytes in size, whereas we're actually working on some improvements to it that are going to come out hopefully in the coming weeks. That will increase the size of the model to about 7 megabytes. It's not really huge, but
that doesn't seem huge at all.
No. So what I had initially thought is that you go through millions of cat photos to be able to make it so my cat photo looks better when the size changes. But it's really not that. It's really just local pixels and relationships between pixels, in which case you don't need to have a huge database of photos.
It depends on the feature.
You do for your testing and for optimizing your algorithm, but you don't need to have a million photos of people on the beach to be able to use your ML enhance feature of photos for photos of people on the beach.
Actually, this is interesting because it really depends on the feature. For certain things, the data set, always the data set is one of the most important things. Having a high quality data set is very important. But the number of photos varies. So actually for our ML enhance feature, which is the automatic enhancement, the magic wand tool that we might find in other apps, for that one, we actually had to get about 20 million photos, I think.
Wow.
Because in that particular tool, it's very important to have a very, very wide data set because it has to get the white balance right and lighting and stuff. But for this one, I can't remember exactly how many photos we used, but it's in the thousands, right?
That's not a lot,
right? So it's not too much. Maybe a bit more than
that. That's my photos library.
Yes.
So where does one get?
Yeah, where do you get these photos? Do you just pull them down from Flickr?
Yeah, publicly available. So like places like Unsplash and stuff. So yeah, and then we use those. But so for example, with ML super resolution, it's once you have that, once you've trained the model, it doesn't really have any information about photos. It literally just has this knowledge in the form of neural connections in the network, which sounds really awesome as well. But other apps or other services will provide this, by like online because they don't have any kind of desktop apps for it, and they want to charge I've seen things for like where they charge certain monthly amounts and where you upload them online, which it's not a great feeling to do that. So it's much nicer just to stick it on an app on your desktop and have it do all the magic on your hard drive, on your GPU.
That's one of the things I think is interesting about Adobe's approach is they have everybody who subscribes to their Lightroom plan. If it's uploading the images, Adobe basically is using everyone's image as the data source to build their algorithms. Everything is randomized. Everything is anonymized, but they have just probably millions of images that they can work on. But the other side of that is if you want to take advantage of any of these features, it has to go up to the cloud. Like you can't do anything locally. If your machine's not connected to the internet, you can't use any of those features. So all the processing is done in the cloud. And what I like about the way you're doing it and the way Apple has done it too is it's all being locally processed, and you're getting the advantages without having to hit the cloud every time.
Yeah, it's just a much nicer kind of experience. I would agree. I might prefer that as well.
A number of your features have little ML buttons, like in Apple Photos, the auto buttons, and other ones have similar. AI, I think, is what Luminar says. You've got lightness, white balance, color balance, but you don't have black and white. How come you don't have an auto black and white conversion yet?
Just not something that we've trained any algorithms on. It's really just, I guess, a matter of priorities.
Well, you should get to it. Black and white photography. Black and white is real photography.
Absolutely. No, I think it'd be great. But there's I think what we've done so far. So we started off with the auto enhance feature, right? That was like the first step. First off, we released the white balance feature, and if you've had a chance, any photographers had a chance to try it out, I think most will say that it's more accurate than any other auto button out there. I would. That's the feedback I've heard, and that's what we've also tested. So I think that's something we worked on quite hard. But it's not something that auto white balance isn't something that regular people would sort of pay attention to. It's really more for photographers. And then the ML Enhance came from that, because once you can fix the white balance of an image reliably, you can create a really good automatic enhancement tool, because it won't take a badly balanced yellow cast photo and saturate that, right? It'll fix it, and so we think that's really great. And then we moved on to ML denoise. That was our second main machine learning core ML powered tool in Pixelmator Pro, which removes image noise. But we're still working on that as well, improving it update to update. And then ML super resolution actually came as a result of our work on ML denoise, because when you upscale a photo, you have to ignore the noise and stuff, so that doesn't, you get big blobs of noise.
So one feature builds on another feature as you go forward. Yeah,
and that's so maybe auto black and white, machine learning powered auto black and white. I mean, I can totally see it working, and we could do it, but it's just that the progression as it's come so far has led us to this point.
We'll look for that in the next version because of this conversation. Yeah. So
yes,
so one question that I have.
I want credit someplace in the about box or something. I'm kidding. But black and white is important, and it's true that I particularly like Apple's black and white tool in the Photos app, where you have a slider with the little thumbnails instead of the 5 sliders that you have, because for most people that's a lot more intuitive than thinking which color channel do I want to make darker or lighter.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think in this particular case that would be great. I think I can imagine again us getting to it and doing something like that. For now, we use the kind of classic approach, but I think a more intuitive one slider way would be awesome. Maybe with the option to for people who know what they're doing with channels.
Yep.
Yeah.
So one question that I have, and this kind of backs up a little bit, but there aren't many developers out there that are really taking advantage of machine learning yet. I think Pixelmator, I think Luminar, and then to certain degrees, Adobe in little spots, Apple in little spots. And part of my question is why? It seems to have a lot of advantages. Is it particularly more difficult than, say, implementing a better white balance control that doesn't use machine learning? Why has Pixelmator really jumped into machine learning? I mean, we have talked about machine learning as really being the future of photography, but getting down to the implementation level, what about it really drew Pixelmator to implement that?
You could probably say it all started with the repair tool that we did. That isn't strictly Core ML powered, but our object removal tool uses some neural network inspired technologies in its training. So what I was mentioning about checking for quality and the loss function, I think it's something similar that's used to train the repair tool, which is you could probably say it's the most successful, single tool in the app that we've, in terms of getting us featured in places and just, wowing people. So the object removal tool, the repair tool, that would be it. And since we started on that, we've had people working on machine learning and this AI stuff, and that's why we were drawn to it to an extent, because I guess the early huge successes with it, and obviously Core ML came out, and we always love to try just any sort of new Apple technologies, see what we can do with it, and we had some really great ideas about how we can use it, because I think again our auto enhancement tool that is machine learning, fully Core ML powered, is great. I think compared to what you get in a lot of other apps, I think it does an amazing job. It's quite subtle as well, which maybe takes away from it. Maybe it's to its detriment sometimes, but we with each of these tools we try and preserve the quality of the photo, the look of the photo as much as possible, and just do what a human would do, what would look natural. So yeah, that's I guess that's kind of an intro to that. As for why other companies aren't doing this, I think to an extent it is about difficulty. I think to some extent with Apple, maybe it's a marketing thing. I think with their stuff that they're doing, the deep fusion stuff, I guess they're not saying as loudly, it's machine learning, but they use it for certain things. But I think there is some very exciting things that you can do with machine learning. Again, super resolution being one of them. That's very kind of visibly obvious, where you just create quality out of almost nothing. You could say, that wasn't possible before.
We've talked in the past about how computational photography is becoming the big deal in photography, that when you take a photo with an iPhone, you're not just taking a photo, you're taking a photo that's doing 12 trillion operations and different photos and slices and all that. And we didn't really see that on the desktop in the same way, but it looks to me now that with this sort of machine learning AI-based stuff, we're going into that same idea of computational photography, just sort of ex post facto, that you've taken your picture and then you do the computational stuff afterwards instead of when you're shooting it. I had a job for a short time, I think it was 19 years old, and I worked as a courier for a company that did retouching of Cibachrome prints for the fashion industry. And I would watch these people with these little brushes and these little colors, and it was all manual, it was all analog. And we've gotten to the point now where I've just got a photo open in Pixelmator. I took a photo of the church that's around the corner from where I live. And it's this wonderful old church, but there's this big barrel for water in the middle of the photo. I took your repair tool, boom, it's gone, poof. It was never there. And with all of this machine learning stuff, auto enhance and everything, it's almost as if we've gotten to a point where the computer is the photograph.
I think I would agree to that with that to an extent, but I think machine learning is always going to take care of the kind of menial tasks the most, right? So getting the white balance right. There's some creative, artistic element to it. Or removing objects, of course, maybe there is an element to how you mask them in using other objects. But I think for the most part, the creative part is taking the photograph and applying your vision to it in terms of the color edits. But there are some menial things that kind of are a bit annoying, right? So removing objects, adjusting white balance and stuff.
Well,
like
but
that.
when you click on ML Enhance, for most people who aren't really photographers, I'm doing the air quotes, all they need to do is take a photo, click on ML Enhance, and it's going to look better. It doesn't matter. And I'm not talking about fixing composition. You're not going to auto crop photos unless you decide to have an algorithm to auto crop portraits in a certain way.
We actually have that in Pixelmator Photo, an ML crop algorithm.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
On the iPad.
Okay.
Yeah.
But my point is that there's so much now that anyone can take a picture, and there's so much behind it that can improve that picture, to the point where you would have had to read 3 years of a photo magazine with Photoshop tutorials to get that 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I think that kind of reflects the kind of democratizing of lots of things in the world, where knowledge is more easily accessible, and even tools as well are much more readily available. But I think that just empowers people even more. That will inspire them to look into this stuff and not be put off by maybe the technical stuff, because they can see that they can just do it with a click, and now they just want to understand it rather than maybe So yeah, I think it's I think it's a pretty cool thing. But I would agree with you that is happening, definitely.
Andrius, thank you very much for joining us. I strongly recommend that anyone who hasn't tried Pixelmator Pro for the Mac, go to the Pixelmator website. You can download a demo, can't you?
Completely free trial, no registration required, no emails, 15 days, use it for free.
Even though it's only sold in the Mac App Store, you do provide a demo.
Absolutely.
So it's worth trying. Drop some photos in, use the ML Enhance, and I think you'll really find this to be a really powerful tool. Unless, of course, you're like Jeff, wedded to the Adobe Industrial Complex.
We'll get him
I am
eventually.
wedded to any tool that needs to get the job done.
Yes. Okay. Andrius, thank you very much for taking time today.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
So before we get to our snapshots, I just want to let everyone know that we have 5 promo codes for Pixelmator Pro to give away to people who subscribe to our newsletter. And Jeff's going to tell you how to subscribe to our newsletter.
You're going to go to photoactive.co, which is our website where you'll find all of our show notes and archive of episodes. At the bottom of every page, there's a little sign-up form to subscribe to our newsletter. We pretty much use it only for doing giveaways and to announce new episodes.
And we've done lots of giveaways. So
we've done lots
if
of
you subscribe
giveaways
to our newsletter, you will be entered into all future giveaways.
We just gave away 2 copies of Harold Davis's Creative Black and White book.
Okay, Jeff, snapshots. I hope you have something interesting this week.
I do have something interesting. It has nothing to do with what we've been talking about. For someone who's doing photo shoots, as I do occasionally, sometimes you need a reflector. And I believe we've talked about reflectors in the past. I just picked up a new reflector, and it is a Neewer 24-inch collapsible triangle multi-camera lighting reflector. And the difference between this is most reflectors are just circles. And that's great if you have somebody who can stand there and hold it. The triangular ones have a little hand grip on one of the corners. And what that allows you to do is you can basically hold your camera in one hand, hold the reflector in another if you are shooting, say, someone's portrait solo, or maybe you're doing some macro work and you don't have either something to hold it against, or you don't have a person that can hold a reflector for you. It's just really handy. It folds up flat into a small little circular bag, and it was $16.
Circular reflectors are really practical, but I had to look at a YouTube video to figure out how to fold it up to get it into the bag.
The big ones especially. I have like a large backdrop, and I had to bookmark a YouTube video because I kept forgetting how to do it.
Once you figure it out, though, it makes sense.
And also, pro tip, especially when you buy a brand new reflector, when you open it, don't put your face too close to it because it will pop out and hit you in the face. I'm not saying that I know this through experience, except that I know this through experience.
Yeah.
Kirk, what do you have this week?
Well, my snapshot is something that I don't own and probably never will. Can you guess what it is?
A dog?
No. Good point, though. I'm never going to get a dog. Leica announced the new M10 monochrome camera. And as I've mentioned in the past, this is the camera I lust after, the Leica M monochrome. But what they've done with the M10 is really, it's a huge jump. So the previous model had a 24 megapixel sensor, and the new one has a 40 megapixel sensor. In addition, the sensor is very different. In the past, what they did is they took existing sensors and they kind of peeled off the color filters that were on top of them. But here they've developed, now I don't know if they've developed their own sensor or someone else has developed it for Leica, but these filters don't need to be peeled off. It's a native monochrome sensor. I won't go too much into it. I'm going to link to an article that I put on my website that particularly links to a very detailed review and a very good YouTube video that explains what's so special about this kind of sensor. If you listen to the show regularly, you know I like black and white. But what I really noticed in the sample raw images that I found and then the sample JPEGs that Leica is distributing, this really has more of a filmic look than in the past, kind of like Tri-X-Pan. It's beautiful, but it's 7,250 pounds. I think it's $8,750 US. And unless there's a wealthy person listening to this show who's going to buy it for me, I don't think I'm ever going to own one. As much as I would, this would be like a midlife crisis camera, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Hey, you know what? That's much better than buying a sports car.
It is, although you can actually get a car for this price. But the problem is,
Wow.
that's just the camera.
Not
You've
a
gotta-
midlife crisis car.
No, but then you've got to buy the lenses afterward.
Yeah.
So just for a decent 50 millimeter lens, you're talking another 2,000 pounds. Essentially 10,000 pounds or $12,000 ish for the camera and a decent enough lens. We can dream, can't we?
We can absolutely dream.
Okay. Well, that's enough for this week. I will not have a monochrome for our next episode. I will not have a dog either. Thanks for listening to Photoactive. You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. We couldn't afford the M. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/photoactivecast. That's photoactivecast in one word. You can subscribe to Photoactive in your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts. See the links on our website. And think about leaving us a rating or review in iTunes or in your podcast app.